Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, senior editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. And what you just heard were the unbelievable sounds of the Jerry Cherry Band, who is a big-time fan of the Steelers and of the Behind the Steel Curtain network of podcasts. And you'll notice there's just two of us tonight. That's right. Dave Schofield is on vacation. So it's just myself, Bryan Anthony Davis. What's up, Bryan?
I've been telling everybody he's on assignment. I think that sounds so much more official.
What is that assignment again?
Yeah, the assignment might be with a fishing rod. Well, you know, Big Bro Sco has a fishing rod wherever they are. It might be a margarita. I'm afraid the assignment includes Speedos, but you know, that's where my mind goes. So
well, he did have that Behind the Steel Curtain flag printed up, and they were flying that high down in Nag's Head. So if you're down there in the Outer Banks, you got to catch them early. They come back, I think, on Saturday. So get out there and see if you can see the Scobros down there in the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
I love it. Always repping.
Absolutely. I am not, when I go down to the Outer Banks, I don't have a flag that I fly or anything like that, but still, it'll be a good time. I'll be on vacation towards the end of the month. Bryan will be out. Is it 2 weeks?
2 weeks from tonight. Yeah, I'll be doing my scout duties.
There you go.
In the woods. The people trust me with their children.
That's scary. Well, what is it on the movie Up, the Wilderness Explorer? Kakaya. Like that's
yeah. So adventure is out there, and it's funny because I've got a hat that I wear, and you know I'm sort of short and squat, and they made me hold balloons because when I wear the complete uniform and I have the shorts and the socks up high, I look like Russell. But I will tell you this. I do go into a completely different mode when I'm in charge of people's children. I'm not bad. I'm Mr. Bryan, and I'm too scared.
I get it. All right, let's get this show off right. I want to get your thoughts. We are going to actually do something a little different. We'll explain that here in a second. I want to get your thoughts, though, on the Baker Mayfield trade. Obviously, I think it was Wednesday last night around there. Baker Mayfield was traded to the Carolina Panthers. Just what were your general thoughts? We don't need to go into a deep dive into this thing.
I just think that it's kind of about time, and really, that was a divorce. There's no healing that. You're catching the husbands with a whole bunch of coke and 3 strippers in the act is basically what happened, and there's not enough flowers, there's not enough diamonds, and there aren't enough Mercedes to get you out of this problem, Cleveland. You created it, and then you got to a point where you're like, we kind of just gotta get what we get. And it reminds me of a situation with the Steelers. I can actually say it reminds me of 2010 when they knew that Santonio Holmes was going to be suspended, and they dealt him a couple weeks before the draft. He was going to be out for 4 games, and they got a 5th round pick for him. Or was it a 6th round pick? It was something
I think
egregious.
It might have been 6. It wasn't.
I think it was a 6th. And I'm sure that goes into. Dave knows the formula that ended up becoming Antonio Brown somehow, but really it's just a situation they had to do it. I'm sad because I wanted number 6 to be in Cleveland forever.
Well, yeah, because Baker Mayfield sucks.
Absolutely, and we can't say that. We get him this year though.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it might be Sam Darnold. Who knows?
At that point.
But still, yeah, interesting stuff. So we've been talking about throughout the day what we want to do in this show. And, you know, I mean, we're all scraping the bottom of the barrel. Let's put it that way. We're trying to just get through the next few weeks until training camp starts back up. And then we're going to have a ton of talking points. But until then, it is difficult to give daily content the way that we do here behind the steel curtain. And I threw out a couple ideas. Bryan was like, I said, why don't we just go and talk about our favorite players? People love to know who our favorite players are. If you're watching live on Facebook or on YouTube, you can chime in when we get to that. And what we're going to do is just talk about by position, our own individual personal favorites. So Bryan's going to be able to go much further back than me. And I'm going to give you reasons why I like some players. Maybe it's just because the fact that I grew up with them. We'll see. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through offense, defense, and we're going to do our favorite Pittsburgh Steelers by position.
Before we do that, I just dropped the red flag.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to do a little instant replay here, Jeff, because I believe I agreed with it.
With
I
what?
Yeah, we can do that. And then you're like, oh, why don't we do this instead? So
Ah,
I
you
go,
didn't read my first one? It was
so-
about renovations because we're redoing our kitchen, and I was so frustrated. And I get this message like, "Why don't we just talk about renovations?"
and I was like, sure, that works for me. I think that was my exact.
I think
If I
I
go
thought you
back
were
and look,
responding to Dave, but anyways, I like this topic. It is different. It is fun. It is July 7th, so we're going to talk about it. Let's start. You want to do offense or defense first, Bryan?
let's do defense. We always start with offense.
Okay. I'm going to start defensively. We're going to start on the defensive line. Now, typically, you could pick any number of players. I would say no more than 4 should make your list, but Bryan, I'll let you go ahead first. What are some of your favorite defensive linemen?
Well, I'm gonna up the ante here too. We can go ahead and we're talking about current Steelers, right?
Well, no, it could be all
Oh, we're
time.
going all time. Okay, so then I
Yeah.
don't have to up the ante. You know what? It's not hard for me to go ahead right away and say Cam Hayward from the current team. I mean, he epitomizes everything that the Steelers are. Jeff, Cam could have played. Cam's a guy that could have played in the 1970s. He could have been on that steel curtain line, and he's just the heart of the champion. And he reminds me a lot of Joe Green, not in stature. They're two different looking guys in stature, but just with as far as leadership goes, I love 97. So that's my number one. I'll let you go. I think we should go back and forth on this.
Okay. You said Cam. I'm gonna go, and this is again a generational thing. I'm gonna go with Aaron Smith. He was always one of my favorites. I just liked how he just no nonsense. He wasn't the rah-rah guy. The dude never left the field, it seemed like, and he just made he made those plays that made everyone else around him better. And that goes unnoticed, but I'm gonna go Aaron Smith for my first one. And these are in no particular order. I'm just thinking. Go ahead, Bryan. What's your next one?
I'm going to go to the 80s on this one. And this
Okay.
guy is top 5 in sacks of all time. And a lot of people just don't realize who number 93 was. And that's Keith Willis from the 80s. Just a fantastic player. I believe he had 15 sacks one season. It might have been 83. He was just absolutely fantastic. He was just on a bad defense. But if that guy was around in the 70s, I think they win a lot more games.
Yeah. No one brings up the 80s for a lot of reasons. It's because they never won a Super Bowl. And that kind of makes me think about Cam. If Cam never wins one, is he going to be viewed kind of like Dermontti Dawson? Tremendous player, Hall of Famer, but just doesn't, I'm sorry, maybe it's just me. He doesn't get brought up in the same way as other players that have won a ring. And maybe that's just me. But the 80s players fall into that category. They never got home and won a Super Bowl. So I think that's probably why a lot of people look down on the 80s. But there were some good players. I'm going to go with Big Snack Casey Hampton. He was the plug in the middle of that early 2000s, especially in 04, 05, all the way through 2010 was tremendous. Big Snack, Casey Hampton, failing the run test every year. That was like a rite of passage for training camp at St. Vincent College. I'm going to go with Big Snack. I'm also trying to avoid the obvious. Like the steel curtain everyone loves the steel curtain. Even if you weren't alive for those guys, I'm just thinking outside the box. Bryan, what about you?
I've got to copy you with Casey Hampton. There's no way this list cannot be without number 98.
Yeah.
Just a wide load, perfect. And, really unsexy pick when they took him. Back in 2001, when they took him, the more heralded rookie was Kendrell Bell, number 2 from Georgia. And he won Rookie of the Year. But Casey Hampton was the one who endured. And there was times when you thought, how's this guy going to endure? That's going to be really tough. But he was just one of those guys that, like I said, not a sexy pick at all. They had the 16th pick. The Jets wanted Santana Moss. So they traded with the Steelers. Steelers got their guy at number 19 and able to add like maybe Hank Poteet or somebody else in that draft with that extra pick.
I'm going to go with the obvious, even though I said you kind of overlook. You have to go with Mean Joe Green, one of two players to have their numbers retired in Pittsburgh Steelers history. You have to go with the icon. He is the icon. Everyone you talk to, everything you read, you hear, everyone talks about how he was the guy. The only person I believe in the organization with 6 Super Bowl rings too. Interesting fact about Mean Joe Green. So there you go, Brian. I'm sure you're going to echo that one as well. I would imagine.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Dick Hoke might have 6 too as a coach.
I don't think he was with them for 43, but I could be wrong.
He may have not been there for 43. I know he's there for 40. So yeah, that's really close in there. So I want to go Joe Green too, but there's a guy I can't leave out. I mean, Joe Green is probably the all-time greatest Steeler. Really, I mean, we could be talking these days, we could be talking about Ben, but for me, it's Joe Green's the one who started it all and helped make them what they were. But on the other side of that line, on that steel curtain line, I have his jersey. I met him when I was about 9 years old, LC Greenwood. And I just think that I'm going to be talking about him later on the show in final thoughts. But this guy, if this guy's not a Hall of Famer, I don't know. I don't know who is.
Yeah, that's tough. And I'm not going to say anything. I'll let you chime in on that during your final thoughts. But that's it for me. Those are the defensive linemen. And they've had so many good ones that we didn't even mention. You know, you could talk about in terms of your favorite people. Remember, this is favorite players. This is not the best player. This is our favorite players. So like Brett Kiesel would be close to that lead, that list for me. I loved watching Brett Kiesel play when he did his celebration where he shot the arrow and stuff like that. Yep. That was great. Like I love that stuff. He was a great personality on that team. I love Stephon Tuitt.
Yep.
When he was with the team and healthy. He was a wrecking ball. Just tremendous. So let's leave the defensive line and let's go to maybe one of the most difficult positions, and that's outside linebacker. And this is going to be difficult, Brian, based on the fact that back in the 70s, they ran a 4-3. So you can either include those players in the inside if you want, or you can throw them the outside. It doesn't matter. When you think of outside linebackers in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's the first person that comes to mind?
Well, how many do we have for this? How many are you giving me?
Let's go 4.
Okay, 4. Well, the very first one, and I'm partial because he's hometown, but he was great. And Jack Ham.
Special teamer.
Yeah. Yeah, Doug Whaley disagrees. And hey, Doug Whaley doesn't even have a podcast right now. So, yeah, I think, no, Johnstown's own Dobra Shunka, just, man, he was the man. And when you grew up in Johnstown, that even made you more of a Steeler fan because this was a guy that just did everything. And he's one of those players that, you know, he was a Hall of Famer. Everybody loved the guy, but when you have the personalities of a Franco Harris, you have a Joe Green, you have a Terry Bradshaw, a Lynn Swann, all those vibrant personalities, and then you have just Mr. Blue Collar, Western PA, who just did it all. I mean, he could drop back in coverage, no problem. Just wreck you and sack you. Yeah, he did that too. Did stop the run. He had so many different tools, Jeff.
Yeah, I wasn't alive for that era, but I've read a lot, watched a lot of Jack Ham. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason. When someone says to me, Jeff, outside linebacker Steeler, go. And the first person that's going to come to my mind, and don't ask me why, it is, well, everyone, if you listen to my podcast, it's not live on YouTube or Facebook, it is Let's Ride. And that's Who Ride on 3, Let's Ride, 1, 2, 3, Let's Ride. It's Joey Porter. It's Peasy. It was that team, that 2001 team that, man, that 2001 all the way through the 2000s were just, I loved that time for Steelers football. And he encapsulated everything that I wanted the Steelers to be. He was the villain that everyone loved to have on their team when he had his shirt up, showing off the 6-pack abs, and he's just barking at guys before the game. Hey, sometimes fighting them before the game. It doesn't matter. I mean, that opened the door to James Harrison. We'll get to him in a little bit, but still, Joey Porter, number 55, was one of my all-time favorite Steelers. and especially at outside linebacker. I'll never forget for the rest of my life him sacking Peyton Manning in what should have been the game-sealing sack against the Colts in the AFC divisional round in 2005. Just unbelievable. I love me some Joey Porter. That's where I'm going to go. Bryan, who's next?
I cannot disagree with you on Peasy. It was my sister's favorite player because she just entertained him. I mean, he was just so entertaining to her. I love me some Peasy too. For me, when you talk about, you could probably talk about Peasy as one of the bad dogs, but the toughest dog before Peasy was Greg Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't hired for my disposition. I need that t-shirt. I still don't have it. It's just, Greg Lloyd was that guy that you were young, but they were making that run in 1989. And he sacks Pat Ryan of the Jets in December. And they needed to win a lot of games because this was not a good team. But they made it far in the playoffs that year. But this defense was led by Greg Lloyd and Rod Woodson and Carnell Lake. But Lloyd went in, sacked this guy, knocked him out, basically, and then tapped him out like it was WWE. Just went boom, boom. Tapped the man out. Jets fans were livid, and I was watching the game with a Jets fan. One of my best buddies of all time was a Jets fan living in Steeler country, and he just hated it. But what happened when that happened? I just said, "That's my guy." I always liked him. He was in his third year, but Greg Lloyd, and that guy he was menacing, but he had a personality too. I remember him cussing when they won the AFC championship trophy.
Yeah.
But I have a great memory of him. You know, I go to the signings, and I was helping out at a signing. And then it was my time to turn around and go get some signings. So I was like backstage. I was working with the athletes. And then I come out, and the one girl that was working with Greg Lloyd at the time, I knew her, and I was talking to her. And then so he comes out. I mean, I get his autograph, and he comes out afterwards, and I'm just standing there, and I'm not dressed like a full-fledged fan. And all these people are trying to get free autographs. And this is an autograph signing. You know, you don't really do that. And he went past them and looked at me and pointed and goes, "Hey, man, you doing well?" And he knew me for a second, and he felt like he knew me. And that's who I'll never forget that about Greg Lloyd. He was really cool to me.
Greg Lloyd would have made my list. I remember in it was 94. I received a reversible Greg Lloyd jersey. I think that was straight from either Gabe's or Hills.
Hills. That's snack bar too.
Or maybe Farmore, if you're familiar with that.
We had a Farmore too.
Farmore, yeah. Pharmor. Farmore. But still, I love Greg Lloyd. I'm going to go with a guy that at the time when I was young, and so I was like 11 or 12 years old, if there was another love that I had in my life at that time, it was wrestling. And I loved Hulk Hogan. The blonde hair, the way he got the crowd involved. He put his hand up, let me hear it, Hulkamania, all this stuff. And Kevin Green did not spend a lot of time in Pittsburgh. And that's what people forget. It meant a lot. May he rest in peace also, but it meant a lot when he went into the Hall of Fame as a Steeler. It meant that he cared about that time so much, even though he didn't spend a lot of time there. Watching Kevin Green get the crowd jacked up, I was not shocked at all when he ended his football career and went into wrestling, because he just fit. Everything fit. He had the hair, he had the personality, he had the persona, the machismo, as Razor Ramon would say. And I just loved Kevin Green, and he and Lloyd will meet at the quarterback. I mean, that was those Blitzburg defenses. Everyone wants to talk about the early 2000s. A lot of those people weren't alive for those 90s defenses. They were fast. They were physical. And, man, they would get after the quarterback. It was fun to watch. So Kevin Green makes my list of my top 4 favorites. What about you, Bryan? What's next?
He absolutely has to make the list, man. I loved him as well. And, he also had his own Miss Elizabeth in a way, because his wife would do the national anthem a lot at Heinz Field back in those days.
I did not know that. I didn't know that.
She would, not that Miss Elizabeth ever did that, but yeah,
Elizabeth, get down that aisle.
I got it. History beckons the Macho Man. All right. So let me talk about a guy that, was probably before your time too. He made a huge mistake in Pittsburgh and decided to hold out in 1988. But Mike Merriweather was phenomenal. I believe in his second year, he had 15 and a half sacks. He was the guy that had the record before Debo, I believe. And he was menacing. He was everywhere. He was Tony DeFio's first jersey. And Tony got it like in 1988, right before he was traded the next year. They got a first round draft pick out of him. It was that 1989 draft. It was Tom Ricketts. It was the only time that they had two first round draft picks in my lifetime. And I think it was the only time in history, if I'm not mistaken. But Merriweather was a great guy, and he was a great player, but he was young, and he had an agent, and he listened to his agent. And the reason I know that story is I heard it firsthand from Mike Merriweather. And Mike Merriweather said to me, he said, yeah, I made a mistake. I should have never left. Because all I said to him was like, man, I was in high school when you left. It broke my heart because you were my favorite player. He said, yeah, I wish I would have never left. But I didn't know. I was young, and there was money on the table. But I could have stayed and done so much more.
All right, so you went Merriweather. I'm going to do my next two together because they kind of tie hand in hand, in my opinion. And that is one James Harrison and one Trent Jordan Watt.
Yep.
So James Harrison, I mean, his story, everything about his lead up to finally getting on the football field with Joey Porter getting ejected in Cleveland. We all know that story by now. He was just so dominant. And you listen to offensive linemen talk about how he was such a unique beast because he was so small, but he was so powerful, and he used his leverage to get underneath you. And he either drew a holding or he got to the quarterback. Just a lot of fun watching Debo. I've never seen a guy play angrier. I think he's the only guy I could think of that I thought was angrier at no one in general than Greg Lloyd. Greg Lloyd played angry. I think Debo took it up a notch. And then when TJ Watt was drafted in 2017 and he was forcing Harrison on the bench, I remember saying to myself, this guy, man, this guy could be something. I can't say that I thought that 22 and a half sacks was on the table right away or that soon, but I mean, TJ Watt, how do you leave him off the list? Defensive player of the year. He's going to set the record for most sacks by a Steeler. Could it be this year, Bryan?
Yeah, it very well. If I'm not mistaken, he has 69 and the record's 81.
Yeah.
I might need to double check that, but
That's
I'm pretty
okay.
sure that's what it is.
I'm pretty sure it could happen this year.
Yes.
He'll own the all-time sack record for the Steelers, career-wise. It won't take too long. And this guy just keeps up in the bar every single year. It's just I remember people, because I was running the website at the time, that said that TJ Watt was just drafted because he's JJ's brother. He was just drafted because he's a Watt and he was a combine hero. That's what they call him, workout warrior. He's not going to pan out. Well, I would suggest otherwise. Bryan, do you have those numbers?
72. He has 72 sacks. So he is.
So he only needs 9 to tie and 10 to take over, right? Is it 81 or 80?
I thought it was 81 and he needs 81 and a half. So,
okay.
So 9 and a half to tie, or 9 and a half to take over, something like that. But he got close. I mean, we expect him to do that this year.
So that rounds out my OLBs. What about you?
Well, I've got to say one thing about TJ. Yeah, it's kind of like what you said about Joe Green and the Steel Curtain. Everybody loves TJ. I don't know many people that don't. I did see somebody, complaining about him on some site, saying that, well, James Harrison didn't have oxygen like every fourth quarter like TJ does. I mean, when the man balls out like that, I mean, and there's no one behind him.
If he
You
needs
can't.
oxygen, if he
Yeah,
has 22 and a half sacks in a
yeah,
season, I mean, come on.
yeah. I need oxygen watching TJ Watt play. But speaking of oxygen, I will say the greatest Steeler moment in my history was watching James Harrison return that ball.
That's the greatest Super Bowl moment ever.
Yeah, one of the greatest moments in my life, because we got up, we were screaming, we did not. That game was about to go in a bad direction at halftime.
Yeah,
and it just changed everything. And halftime was a blur. I did not see Bruce Springsteen. It was just awesome. But you said something about him playing with a chip on his shoulder. That chip on his shoulder had a chip in it. He had 2 chips on his shoulder. And I think that's what motivated this guy. He kept on adding chips.
Yeah.
Now, he is my wife's least favorite player because, of course, there's something I do. I name drop because I've had an opportunity that I've met these guys. And I remember I was talking to him. I said, I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to get engaged in a couple weeks in Florida. And he's like, why are you doing that? I said, don't do that. You just string her along. You don't have to pay for it, man. And I'm like, well, thanks, James Harrison, for the advice. And then I went home and told her, she's like, I don't like that man anymore. But I love Debo. I think one of the greatest Steelers, and his personality was one of those that he had a lot of personality. And I had the opportunity to interview him for BTSC last year with, I think it wasn't Pepsi, but it was USAA. And the guy was awesome. And one thing that people don't realize about James Harrison, when you ask him the question, like, did you divorce the Steelers? Do you have a problem coming out? He goes, no, I love this team. He's like, I mean, I really enjoy this team. It's business. They have to feed the Rooneys have to feed their family. They've got to take care of business. I had to take care of mine. You can't get mad at somebody for a business decision that doesn't include you.
It's true. It's true. And man, he was not scared of the commissioner. What was it?
No.
The article where he said if he was on fire, I wouldn't piss on him or something.
Walk across the street to pee on him.
All right, let's go to inside linebackers here. This will be let's do 2 at a time just to expedite the process. I don't want to go too long. We still have to go to the offense. My gosh. Let's do inside linebackers. Who do you have for your inside linebackers?
I don't have to say much. Jack Splat, Jack Lambert, 58, boom. That's all I'm going to say.
He's making my list as well. I'm going to see your Jack Lambert, and I'm going to raise you Potsy, one James Ferrier. He was a guy that I felt he actually did get some Defensive Player of the Year votes, I think in 2004.
Yeah.
He was just that good. And he was that good for that long. And so the Jets, I know you have that story about going to New York and thanking everyone for James Ferrier.
We couldn't get a Yugo for this guy.
But yeah, it's
a Yugo. The guy said it to me. It's great.
James Ferrier was so good. And I remember the first game I saw at Heinz Field was in 2003. They played the San Diego Chargers, LaDainian Tomlinson. Both teams were bad. I was given the tickets. They're like, seriously, you can just go up and go. And I was in high school, and I went and I saw James Ferrier hit LaDainian Tomlinson. I've never seen it hit that hard in my life. And you could hear it. You could feel it. I had really good seats, but James Ferrier is on my list for sure. Who's your next?
Yeah, I'm going to give a guy that wasn't there for a long time either. And there's a lot of different ways I could have went here. David Little's a guy I wanted to go with here, but I was a big Chad Brown fan when he was here. Now, he moved to outside linebacker at 96 and had 14 and a half sacks.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. And then they couldn't keep him because they didn't have the money to keep him at that time.
Right.
But Chad Brown came back to the Steelers in 2006. I'm sad. I kind of was upset that he missed the Super Bowl opportunity with Pittsburgh, but he played one more year in Pittsburgh. I thought he was great. Chad Brown, I mean, he had pet snakes. He was one of those quiet badasses, Jeff.
Yeah, no, he was good. I'm going to go with the guy that stood next to him, and that was Levon Kirkland. He was a freakish athlete. People don't realize that they don't build him like that anymore. I mean, Levon Kirkland was a big, really big man. I mean, and I asked him, I got to interview him on Let's Ride in
That's right.
this
Yeah.
past off season. And I asked him, do you think you could play in today's NFL, or do you think they would try to put you in another position? He said, I know I could play in today's NFL. I said, I love it. The confidence was oozing from the guy still to this day. Levon Kirkland, I just remember him watching. He reminded me, you saw I used to collect cards. And so I got a Levon Kirkland card once, and you see the Three Rivers turf behind him. He's got the big face mask, the big neck roll. He's got the giant pads, and he's just this hulkish man. And he looked like a lion in the Sahara chasing down a gazelle or something. I mean, it was amazing. I love Levon Kirkland. Brings back a lot of good memories. That's who I'm going to go with next. What about you, Bryan?
Yeah, 99 was a great one for me too. Just one of my favorites. 2-time MVP of the Steelers. Was never a defensive player of the year, but one memory I have of Levon Kirkland was Super Bowl 30, when the tide was starting to turn to the Steelers, and he had a sack of Troy Aikman where I don't even think he touched him. I think he just scared him, because I know, they said, oh, he fell down there, but it was one of those that I think he just fell backwards because he knew that would be easier than just getting crushed, because he was about to get lambasted in the next week.
Yeah. So real quick, Brian Brown in the live chat says, I read once Levon Kirkland never played college. Well, it's not true. He played at Clemson. He was an All-American. And I think he actually is either up for induction or is getting into the College Football Hall of Fame. So no, he did play college football.
You're thinking of Ray Seals, who was on that team, 97.
Yeah. Okay. Are you done with inside linebackers?
Yeah.
I was going to do one more. I'm going to Shea leave it up, because when Ryan Shazier came in, it's not because of how his career ended either, because the guy was dominant, and it's just a shame that his career ended the way it did. We'll put it that way. Okay. Let's go to the secondary safeties. You can only pick two. If you need to think about it, I'll go ahead and say my two.
Go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not gonna steal your one, because I know your era.
Well, go ahead and say it. Well, we can have
actually no. I'm not taking your guy, because I actually have a guy that I like more than him. So of course I've got to go Donnie Shell.
Okay, he didn't make my list.
Yeah, that's not the guy I'm thinking of though.
Okay,
and I got to go Minka.
Well, okay, I'm going Troy and Minka.
Okay.
Crap!
I forgot Troy.
You forgot Troy.
I thought you were going Carnell Lake. I'm sorry.
No, I love Carnell Lake.
How did I forget Troy? Gosh, it's
Troy Polamalu. Like I said, I just finished the book by Jim Wexell. I had been reading it for a long time. That guy, man, like that guy. If there was one guy I could sit down and just have a chat with, it'd be him. It'd be him over Ben. It'd be him over anyone else. It would be that guy. What a guy that is. And Minka, people don't think that, I'm always the offense guy. I think the world of Minka Fitzpatrick. I think he is unbelievable. And he actually is one of those players that, if there's someone that comes close to being that type of cerebral mind as Troy, it's Minka Fitzpatrick, I think. Good, bro.
I agree. And, so if I have to take one off the list.
You don't take any off the list.
Yeah, but if I have to add Troy.
Well, you have to. I feel like Troy is a generational player. I mean, you can't not have him on your list.
I was just thinking outside. But there's one guy I want to add. Let me give honorable mention to Darren Perry, 8th round draft choice. That guy was money for that team. I thought he was one of the best safeties in the league. Never went to a Pro Bowl, but he was that good for the Steelers.
And I'll go honorable mention Ryan Clark. Because everyone thinks Ryan Clark was like a product of Troy Polamalu. When you learn about these guys, no, they worked hand in hand. If one didn't do their job, the other one couldn't do their job. So no, I thought Ryan Clark was tremendous, and so was Chris Hope, who played with Troy before Ryan Clark came around. Not bringing up Anthony Smith. Anyways, let's go with cornerbacks. This will be. Let's go with three. Let's go with three cornerbacks. This actually might be more challenging than you think. I think we both have two, the same.
Yeah.
In Blunt and Woodson.
Yes.
So absolutely. Who's your third?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Man, Ike, Ike Taylor.
Going with Ike. In terms of my favorite, because that's what this is. As we're not trying to do like the all-time team, we're trying to say our favorites. I'll see your Ike Taylor. I'm gonna raise you a William Gay because big play Willie Gay, when he had that season where he was just pick sixing everybody and doing the little deer dance and going over and Joey Porter on the other knees, like it was fun. Like they brought some fun back to football. And that's what I always loved. I love guys that seemed like they were having as much fun that I would have been having if I was on the team. And so William Gay, who had a great career, and is now a great coach too. I'm gonna go with Willie Gay. Willie Gay, the deer.
I just saw that picture the other day because I'm revamping. I do it every year for Training Camp Confidential. Get ready for that on BTSC in a couple weeks. So I'm revamping Digit Dynasty, and I do all 100 numbers. And when you say 100, you can't forget about 0 because they actually had a 0. Mm-hmm. But I'm changing all the pictures because I just don't want. You have to change them because you put current player and everything on there. So I'm just going through all these pictures. And when you were talking about Kirkland a little bit ago, I saw a lot of these pictures of him hulking over people. But Willie Gay, I've got a perfect picture of Willie Gay running into the end zone against Cincinnati. He's just like all alone and it's all wide shot. And he's just in the corner. And all you see is field. And it's him on the side. And it's a beautiful picture. Willie Gay was tough. Willie Gay was fast. Willie Gay had personality. After the Super Bowl, Jim Rome used to make fun of him because he at the parade he had some kind of crazy yelp his celebration. But so Jim Rome, either love him or hate him, he would take off Die Hard, and instead of big play Willie Gay, he would just go Will Gay instead of Bill Clay.
That's good. I like that. Okay, let's go to the offensive side of the ball now. We're going to look at offensive line. We'll try to stick to 4 again, like we did on defensive line. Who makes your offensive line all-time team?
John Kolb definitely makes my all-time because he was born on the same day as my father. On both be 75 on August 30th. They were born on the exact same day, but he was a guy that he was responsible for having Bradshaw's back, and he had it well back in the 70s for all 4 of those Super Bowls. John Kolb was a man, and I believe he was a champion weightlifter too. He was just absolutely tough. If I'm looking at center, there's all these guys you can talk about. For me, Mike Webster is the greatest, and I'm not going to talk about anybody else as far as on the offensive line there. As center, excuse me. I've got a guy that was a favorite of mine too, Ramon Foster. There was guys bigger than Ramon Foster and better, but I just love the toughness of Ramon. And if I go ahead and throw in one more, I would just probably, just go from recent days too. And I would throw in, not that recent, but Alan Faneca.
Okay. For me, one of my favorite offensive lines was the Killer Bee era. And so, you're only picking 4, but it's DeCastro, Pouncey. I love the Alejandro Villanueva story. It was just so endearing, and the way that he came back to football after 2 tours with the Army Rangers was just remarkable. Love Ramon Foster. If I have to throw, I'd probably replace him with Faneca because he's a Hall of Famer, obviously. But yeah, those guys, that group was so tight knit. And you throw in Marcus Gilbert, at right tackle if you want. That line was so good together. They were so good together. And the Steelers, believe it or not, had some really, really good offensive linemen when you think back over the years. I know in the live chat, people bringing up Tunch.
And I forgot Tunch.
But yeah, these are just our favorites. So that's, it's good that they had Yeah, Tyler Barr says Ramon Foster's name was Big Ragu. That is correct. Yep. All right, let's go to the wide receiver position. Like cornerbacks, you get 3. Who are your favorite? This is tough. This is really tough.
This is super tough.
Okay,
but
go for it.
I'm gonna go Stallworth.
Okay.
John Stallworth is probably my favorite. That guy, Bradshaw said that early on his favorite was Lynn Swann, but at the end, I read this in Bradshaw's book years back. He said, but at the end, I relied on nobody more than John Stallworth. I just knew exactly where it was. I'm going to stick with the number 82 for the second one, which is going to surprise a lot of people, but Yancey Thigpen.
Oh, you're going to go Randall L.
No, I got to stick with Yancey. He was just, he was a guy that he made things happen for that team. He was like a 4th round pick of the Chargers and cut. I was on the sidelines for his first game, and I got to see him the first time he played, and I think he caught like a 60-some yard touchdown pass from Bubby, and it was just great. That was in 1992, and I've got to go with Hines Ward. Just nobody made me feel better than Hines Ward with his toughness, with the smile, but the fact that he's drafted in 1998 in the 3rd round, and then in 99 they go number 1 with Troy Edwards, and they go 2000 they go number 1 with Plexico, and they had their man all along.
Yeah, that's a good point. So for me, number 1 is Hines. He embodies everything you would want from a Steeler at a position like wide receiver. The toughness to go over the middle, the ability to smack a defender in the face, literally, when necessary. He never backed down from anyone. And there were some Ravens that wanted to literally kill the guy. I mean, not just, we're going to hurt you, like they wanted to kill him. There's a bounty out for him that's been proven. Before Bountygate, there was the Hines Ward bounty with the Baltimore Ravens. So look that up. But Hines makes my list. The next 2 are going to be very controversial, but there's a reason why. The next one's going to be Santonio Holmes. And the reason why is not just the Super Bowl 43 catch, because that in and of itself might just put him on my list anyways. Man, that guy was freaking clutch, especially against the Ravens. I mean, when you think about when a big play needed to be made, he was the one that always seemed that Ben would get out of the pocket and he would just throw up a ball. You're like, oh, man, that's not going to go anywhere. And then, bang, Santonio Holmes comes out of nowhere, catches it, rumbles down the field. He was just that guy. And really, against the Ravens, he was that guy. And that's why I love him, because I hate the Ravens. And the last one, Mike Tomlin spoke a lot about this guy on the Pivot podcast, and we all listened to it, and it was phenomenal. And it made me really think about when he left, how that can't take away from the time that he spent in Pittsburgh. The way that they depart doesn't necessarily dictate what they did when they were in town. And for that reason, it's Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown, was awesome. He was awesome. I loved watching him play that Christmas Day. Was it Christmas Day or Christmas Eve? It was Christmas Day. That play, the Immaculate Extension, as they call it, I can't remember being that excited for a regular season game ever. And that because it was so much on the line. The division was on the line, playoffs, everything. Antonio Brown, for sure. He's on my top 3. People hate it because the way he left and he's such a turd now. I get it. But man, when he was in Pittsburgh and he wasn't AB yet, he was Antonio Brown, and then becoming that young superstar, no one was better. Not Julio Jones. I don't care. Anyone. No one, in my opinion, was better. And so that's why AB's on my list.
Our very own Shannon White gets depressed talking about AB because that was his favorite. He just absolutely loved AB. And every time the guy touched the ball, he was my favorite too. And I really enjoyed watching him. When I look at this list, I don't care. It's just like, for me, Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. Bottom line. For what he did on the field, belongs in the Hall of Fame. That's another debate for another time, and this is a football show. But I'm talking about how this man made me feel as a Steeler fan from 2010 to 2017. It was pure elation watching him play.
For sure.
So I loved everything about him, just because just because this isn't who this list is not who the best is. Because I mentioned Thigpen, I think people were disagreeing with me. He was just a favorite of mine, and that's the way I look at it. But yeah, Antonio Brown needs to be on the list. But when I talk about who I look back at right now as who made me smile the most, Louis Lips would have been on that list too, but I didn't have more.
No, right. I get it.
AB should be on that list too, but those were my three. But yeah, list can't be a list without AB.
Let's go to tight end. You get one.
I get one.
Yeah.
I know where you're going on this.
You might be surprised. Yeah, you know where I'm going, but I have a good honorable mention. We'll put it that way.
I have a good honorable mention too. We've got to go Heath.
Yes.
Because he was it's still not the best. I was a big Eric Green fan.
Yes, that's my honorable mention.
That's your honorable mention? Okay, I took that from you.
No, it's fine. I had a Sega Genesis game, Joe Montana football. It was always the Steelers. They weren't that good, but you know who was really good? Eric Green. Down the seam.
He was alone.
Down the seam to Eric Green. I would dominate teams in Joe Montana football for Sega Genesis. But Eric Green, Heath is Heath. It's Heath.
Yeah. I mean, just
when you think of one Heath Miller play, what do you think of? I can tell you mine right now.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell me yours because I know I'm
Charlie Batch hits Heath Miller near the sideline. He dives, stretches, hits the pylon touchdown. Somehow Charlie Batch led Steelers come back and beat the Ravens at M&T Bank Stadium. That's the play I think of when I think of Heath Miller. That's just
great.
It is a typical Heath Miller, and I don't even think he celebrated that much. And that was a huge play.
he was that guy. He's just, he was more, and you know what? The way he retired, that was fitting Heath. That was Heath. He's like, okay, you know what? I'm done.
I'm done.
No fanfare. I'm done.
If Heath pumped his fist and flexed a little bit, everyone's like, whoa, look at Heath celebrating. Meanwhile, William Gay's over there doing okay. Let's go running backs. You get two.
Oh man, I can't put Najee on the list yet. He's a favorite, right? His favorite Steeler right now, but it's hard to have a list without Franco Harris for me because I grew up watching him.
Uh-huh.
He was the guy when I was a kid. And oh my gosh, there's so many I want to say here. I want to say the names Ernest Jackson and Frank Pollard. I want to say Walter Abercrombie because I loved these guys. But I even want to say another guy, a really fast guy, but I got to go Jerome Bettis.
Yes, you have to. It's the boss.
I loved him so much. I think I fell in love with that team again after they were in that Super Bowl and they brought Bettis on. That's my favorite trade of all time for the Steelers.
Oh, absolutely. But, Jerome Bettis, it was Myron Cope. If you grew up in and around the Pittsburgh area and you got to listen to Myron or watch him on television, listen to Cope's Cabana, he talked about, hey, you look like a bus out there. Hey, Jerome Bettis. It's Jerome Bettis. He's not a head of lettuce. All that stuff that he was
That's pretty good, Jeff.
Thank you. Jerome was so good. Time to make the donuts. That was Jerome Bettis and the bus. And some of the fans that listen to our podcast were only alive for like the 05 Bettis. That wasn't Jerome. Like Jerome Bettis, when they got him in that trade, he was more nimble. He was faster. But Jerome Bettis is on my list. And you know who else is on that list? Is Najee Harris. And I said this about Minka. There's certain players on this current team that have really I have root for them so hard. He's one of them. Yeah, I love his honesty. But yeah, Jerome, and then honorable mention, favorite player growing up. I wore number 29 in 7th grade football for him. That's one Barry Foster. Spent a very short amount of time in Pittsburgh. He literally, I think they ran the wheels off him, and then he left. Yeah. He had so many touches that year.
then he was done.
Yeah, 94 was his last year in Pittsburgh.
Yep. I love Fast Willie Parker. I love that guy. I love Najee
FWP.
Harris. I just couldn't put Najee Harris on the
Yeah,
list
for
yet
sure.
because I can't have a list without Franco Harris.
Yeah. I mean, are people complaining that Franco finished in Seattle? I mean, I was reading some of the comments with AB and stuff like, oh, the way he left. It wasn't pretty when he left either, but
No,
what are you going to do?
and a lot of people don't realize that, you know who held out? And it was almost ugly, but it was a different time. Jack Lambert held out in the 70s.
Yeah.
I think it was 77, and he wasn't coming back. But they Dan Rooney said, hey, let's meet up at the airport.
Yeah.
and Dan had that magic. He was able to do that stuff.
And I have to say Le'Veon Bell too. I mean, because Le'Veon Bell was,
I loved watching him.
Man, talk about versatile. He was like a receiver and a running back in the same body, just absolutely awesome. So let's go to the most important offensive position, and that's quarterback. How many do you want to do?
You got to give us 3 here for a reason.
Okay, so we're all going to say Bradshaw and Ben.
Yeah, we have to.
So who's number 3? Because I heard you and Kyle talking about this the other day when you filled in on the Scobro, and it was all about who's number 3, and that was a really good debate.
But he's not my favorite though.
Okay, sure, go for it.
He's not my favorite. If I've got to say a favorite quarterback, I almost said Bubby here. But Tommy Maddox for me is my number 3 favorite.
The Tommy Gunn era was a lot of fun.
It was just basically 1 year. But that 2002 season, a lot of bad stuff was going on in my life in that 2002 season. But I got lost in number 8. And I remember the fear when he went down with that. It was almost similar. It was a spinal concussion.
Yeah.
It was almost similar to Shazier. I mean, I was really scared watching that. And that's the first time I remember being that scared watching. And then he was back in a couple weeks. But man, I just loved watching him play. Now, there's other guys we can mention. There's a guy that could be number 3 here. Most of the quarterbacks I liked. There's a guy that's showing up a lot that I think might pop up for you. And I agree with him too. And if you heard the debate the other day, if it's the guy that I think you're going to say, I think if he's today, he's better than Lamar Jackson. I think he's an MVP.
I want Slash. I don't want Cordell. I want Slash. Give me Slash and I'll take him. I don't want Cordell. I saw the Cordell experiment. I wasn't interested. He reminds me a lot of Lamar Jackson, and he didn't have the accuracy. He sometimes got happy feet in the pocket when he was just trying to be a pure passer. It just wasn't him. It wasn't his game. Give me Slash though, because Slash was electrifying. Slash, people where I grew up named their dogs Slash because of Slash. That's how crazy that time was, and I know you know that because you were in that area too.
Oh, it was
you
great.
lived there. When Cordell Stewart was Slash, my gosh, that guy. That's fun. That was so much fun.
They were 3-4 that year. And then they started giving him the ball and doing all the Slash things that he would do. And I would actually say that, and I've made this claim before, and we're never going to answer this question. If he would have transformed the wide receiver position if he would have stayed. I really think he would have, because he could have passed the ball. They could have done a lot of stuff with him. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if O'Donnell stayed and they had that weapon in Slash, but he was hell-bent on being a quarterback. The biggest problem with Slash, besides the fact that he had no peripheral vision, the biggest problem with Cordell, was Ray Sherman comes in as the offensive coordinator after Chan leaves. And what does he do? He says, no, Cordell is going to be a pocket passer. You don't go ahead, take a steak and chop it up in a hamburger. You don't do that. And they took Cordell's game away from him by doing that. And I'm surprised that they let that happen.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. Let's do the last grouping. Let's go specialist. Kicker and punter. We have to talk about kicker and punter Who's your favorite kicker and punter? And then we're going to end it.
This is easy for me. If you know anything about me, even though I love Gary, I'm a Norm Johnson guy. He wasn't here long enough. He was 3 years, but I think he's the greatest kicker in Steeler history. I think another number 9 is going to surpass him, but I'm just a Norm guy.
I'm going to go with Chris Boswell. I like Chris Boswell. He came in. Skippy Reed had some good moments as well. But
I loved him.
Jeff Reed, my gosh, that guy was a disaster on and off the field. And I remember when it kind of went. I also really like Sean Swisham, and he resurrected his career in our area. Redskin fans, because that's what they were called at the time. The Redskin fans, you all got Sean Swisham. That guy can't hit an extra pointer. That was before extra points got moved back. Hey, he had a great career. If it wasn't for the freaking turf in Canton, Ohio, who knows? He could still be kicking. We don't know. But yeah,
Jeff, in 20 seconds, I could name you every place kicker since 1970. Just like that. Roy Jarella, Matt Barr. Then you have David Trout, Gary Anderson, Norm Johnson, Merry Christmas, Chris, the guy that, okay, I just screwed it up. But Chris, the guy, they called him Merry Christmas because Chris Brown.
Yeah.
Not the guy that beat up Rihanna, but Chris Brown. And then after that, you had Peterson, you had Skippy Reed, you had Sweezum, and then you had that mess with Scobie and everything, and then Boswell.
Yeah, Josh Scobie came in, and then he was Garrett Hartley, or is it Huntley?
Garrett Hartley, but he never made a regular season. He never made the regular season.
He got hurt.
Yeah, he got hurt. He was a good kicker for the Saints.
Yeah.
They went through so many kickers that year. Yeah. Because
and then
it started with Sweezum. There's 4 guys.
Hey, not many kickers can take a shot to the face like Boswell did last year and live to talk about it.
I know. And Boswell, when he was in college, he was regarded as a long ball specialist. And look at all the 50-yarders he's had just last season.
Yeah.
He was hitting 50-yarders left and right the last couple seasons.
What about your punter?
Josh Miller.
I got to go with Daniel ACLs out of duct tape to Paul
Riddle. You're just going for shock value, Jeff.
Big press. There we go. Big press. Year 2. Sophomore jump, not the sophomore slump.
There you go.
It's not Jordan Berry. I'll tell you that right now. It's not Weasel Boy. So, all right. We have gone long. Bryan, do your final thoughts and we'll get out of here.
All right. So the list came out today for legends, or what do they call it? The old timers committee, or for the older players that are past the ballot. I might have the name wrong, but the list came out and there was a name that was just conspicuous for not being on there, and it was LC Greenwood. And for me, that's just, that just hurts because that guy was that good. I know there's too many Steelers in the Hall of Fame, but I just think that wing needs some Hollywood bags. The other 2 guys that are on the ballot, a lot of people don't know how good this guy was from 1957 to 1964, but Buddy Parker. And Buddy Parker is besides Chuck Noll, he is the only Steelers coach to have 2 NFL championships to his name. It just happened with the Detroit Lions in the Bobby Lane days. And then he brought Bobby Lane over to Pittsburgh. He just couldn't emulate it here. But he had a winning record in Pittsburgh. Buddy Parker was a very good coach. He's on the list. And Art 2 is now on the list as well.
We'll see. Maybe there'll be another celebration in Canton, Ohio. We'll see. The players, when did they get announced? The players, like the semifinalists.
Around September, we'll start seeing a list for that.
Hines Ward better be on it.
Oh, yeah. He needs to be on the list in January, too.
Yes, he does. All right, folks, that does it for us. Dave's not here to send us out, so get the music ready, Bryan. We'll see you next week for another episode that we'll all be back. Seelers Preview. Have a good one, everyone.